Good evening, everyone, and welcome to IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and your premier news program for practical spiritual advice in your everyday life. My name is Andy, and I'm your operations manager here, and we are live from IKYA Center in Oslo, Norway, where it is a sizzling 26 degrees, full summer in May, so it's quite a treat for us Norwegians. We're so happy to have you with us, both all of our students here in the live studio audience, as well as all of you on YouTube Live. Remember, IKYA Live is a news program unlike any other in that it's really a conversation, and it's a unique conversation with a spiritual teacher, an enlightened master, and IKYA helps us to look at the events of the day and to raise our consciousness, to lift our perspective and see things from a higher point, and thereby better understanding what's actually unfolding, and especially looking at the spiritual principles at play. So as a conversation, we need you, both in the audience here and on YouTube, write in your questions and your perspective tonight. Because when we engage IKYA and really dig deeper into the topic, that's where the learning really comes. And it also helps us to, in a way, personalize our relationship with the principles that we're looking at tonight. So we strongly encourage you to, go past any like resistance or fear you might have to stepping out and asking a question. There are no dumb questions. There are only good questions where we can all learn from. So please engage us tonight. Before we get started, go ahead and share tonight's episode with your social media network so that others can join us live. And we're going to get started. We picked a really hot topic tonight because, as you know, the world is in turmoil. And not only is it really turbulent, but there is a trend that has been unfolding over the years and maybe arguably the decades, that there's an increasing sort of negativity and aggression to the human state and to the way in which we communicate with each other and think about the world and issues that we're dealing with. We'd like to really go at that directly and offer a counterpoint. We call it the spiritual rebellion. I'm going to let IKYA unfold that for you, but that's what we're aiming for tonight, is how can we bring a different perspective to the conversation and to everything that's unfolding in the turbulent world around us. So, IKYA, let's turn it over to you and ask, can you tell us a little bit about what you see as this spiritual rebellion?
It is doing the opposite of what your instincts are telling you right now. Let's look at why we are where we are right now. Remember that genetically, I often refer to the tribe as our kind of genetic default, okay? For most of evolution, humans have existed in small groups. And it means that when you exist in a small group, you know everybody, right? And they know you. And you function as a group. It's more harmonious and it feels safe. And what we are experiencing now, of course, is a world where we're doing the opposite. Remember that genetically we haven't changed much. So everything that gives us as humans a sense of community and safety and comfort and togetherness is all gone. Now, we have made that even worse by kind of diversifying too much. As groups grew, what kept them together? Then they needed kings, they needed religions, they needed the same type of belief systems, right? So they could say, well, we are this is what we believe, and thereby this is how we behave. And through those behaviors and attitudes and all of that, we could still feel that we're the same. But now it's all over the place, right? And we're doing it even worse by being consumers and now having created a world where everything is about your needs and how you want it, right? So everything can be tailored to your taste and your wants. You can push a button, you can have anything delivered. And what happens then is that we actually get more anxious. when we are with people who know us, right, that's when we feel safe. So when we then try to compensate that, anxious feeling we get from not having a sense of community, we try that by satisfying needs and wants we consume. But not only that, when we don't know where we belong and we don't know what are other people's intention because we don't share belief systems, we don't share anything anymore, we begin to see other people as the enemy because genetically you're supposed to. Right? When you don't have a togetherness, it means that you are either lost or you are in a hostile environment. Right? It means that you are, facing a different tribe or so the we-ness is gone. So you start thinking of people as enemies because they are different from you. Think of the tribe genetics where all these markers of who we are is we think the same, we behave the same, we have the same body language, the same facial expression, we wear the same clothes, we eat the same food, we believe the same things, we have the same rituals, all of that, right? So when that is gone, we got nothing. And when we look at other people, how we would determine an enemy would be looking at, are they different from us? Right? And now everybody's different from you. So then we get afraid because survival for humans has been so closely linked to collaboration with others. When you look at the theory of evolution, that is the key to human success. It's not survival of the fittest, I would think of fighting everyone. No, the fittest means those who collaborate when it comes to humans. So working together, but working together means that we need to share intention, we need to share a platform, we need to share what we want in life, right? And this comes back to belief systems, behaviors, all of that, so we know that we're on the same team. And that is gone. So our brains will then try to, okay, what is similar to me? And then it could be when you want to protect yourself because everybody's an enemy, and you just then want to get as much as you can because you feel anxious. Think of if you are in a hostile territory, you need to grab whatever you can, right? Whenever you can get food, you want it. Whenever you can get something because you don't have that community around you. So you want more stuff, and it never fills that void of fear and loneliness, right? So you try to then figure like who's like in the same kind of thing as me, and then you look at who's buying the same things, right? Who's got the same views? Who's got the same quirks? Who got the same and you then say, oh, could this be it? And then you create a false sense of security, often by aligning with people who are fighting the same enemies you are. Right? Because that's how you can feel safe. Because if you're fighting, if you have to protect yourself, if you have a common enemy, that is a marker that your brain can recognize, oh, we're on the same team. This is also, in a country, whenever leadership is awful, as it often is, the best way to get people in line is by having an outer enemy. Defining an outer enemy, because then, okay, at least we're in the same country, we have to fight together, all other conflicts are gone for now. So yay us, right? So we do that. So we then create a sense of togetherness through aggression and violence, because that makes us feel that we have a tribe. So our brain is then drawn into conflicts, enemies, war, being against thing, looking at them, identifying groups that can be all these internal enemies. So you can say, aha, this is why I feel insecure. Your genes are constantly looking for it. And then your sense of community is the ones who are fighting the same enemy, right? That has always been, throughout evolution, a key to survival, right? Because it means at least if we fight together, we increase our chance of survival. So where we're now, this is happening, both in your individual psychology, but also on group level. Because everybody's miserable. Everybody's afraid. We're not, as humans, there yet genetically to be able to handle diversity and kind of the globalized world yet. So we then feel lost and we just want to feel something and that we're on the right side. We want to survive. That also means politically we become more extreme, right? Because when we're fighting, we're all fighting the good fight, of course. Everybody's on the right side, you know, just like in religion. How wonderful it is that your God is the right one. It's always that, right? So everybody's then clumping themselves together and becoming more extreme because there are enemies everywhere, right? So you see that in religion, where religious people have a tendency to become more extreme. Politics, people become more extreme. No matter what you believe, even environmentalists become more extreme, right? Whatever you do is like you have to fight something because then you will attract like-minded people. It's not a good place for humans right now. And it's easy, even, you know, as a spiritual student, to be sucked into this because you have a human body, you have human genetics, and it means your body and your brain is going through the same thing as everybody else. And most of you can feel it. But the challenge is, and this is a very important thing to understand, that whatever you react to, you become. When you react to something spiritually, it's because you're in denial of that, whatever it is outside of you, that lies within. And the reason why you encounter it is so that you may experience it and be triggered and thereby go into the conflict with yourself through the outer proxy. And through that negotiation, you get to know yourself and whatever you're fighting against, and then over time you dissolve the conflict and you learn and you heal. So it's always that. But also understand that whenever you let yourself be triggered, number one, it's because it's in you. Number two, you become that energy, meaning that you are locking your own consciousness to the lowest level. When you react, it's a biological process of survival, of competition, right, of aggression. It's the more kind of animal level in you. So you lower your own consciousness. And it's the same thing, for instance, we can often see that when people protest, right? What energy are they in, you know? It can be so violent and vicious. It can start out as a wonderful ideal that they want to change the world, or they point out something that is, you know, unfair or whatever. But because they are triggered, they become the worst version of themselves. They carry an energy that is equally as destructive. And spiritually, we're not doing that. And it's difficult for kind of normal people to actually understand because they live in a world where they're constantly being triggered, where they constantly react. And what we're going to look at today is how to do it the spiritual way, because this whole complex that we're talking about now, that is what we have to rebel against. But we don't rebel against it by becoming it. Then you lower your consciousness. You're blocking healing. You're pulling the world down. So you cannot attack, be aggressive, you know, and all of that to lift the consciousness of the world. But you're also human, so how do we do this for real? So that's what we'll figure out today. And I hope many of you also have suggestions and angles and questions. Do we have any?
Yeah, we've actually got more of a perspective or observation from YouTube first. Um, One person noticing kind of the generation gap that can occur at work. And he's noticed that there's something with the younger generation now that saying one sentence wrong or misunderstood or politically incorrect or ironic, and I mean, the younger generation gets super triggered, but also the whole infrastructure that the older generation has created around political correctness and sensitivity and all of that has heightened that whole triggering mechanism and complex that you're talking about. And so I'm kind of triggered to ask you, could you talk a little bit about, because it seems historically maybe new or at least like extreme, this kind of sensitivity and even the system we've created around how to deal with people's inability to kind of receive anything they don't like.
Right. But this is back to what I described. When we have created a world where everything is to be catered to you and your liking, and you can buy whatever you want, it has to be exactly like that, you believe that you have the right, right? Social media is a place where anyone can have their biases confirmed, right? And that means that we all think that we are the smartest person in the world because we get it, right? Through our biases, because we have some idea that we will have that mirrored, we'll have that reinforced. This is why, you know, there are more conspiracy theories than there's like facts online now. And the thing is, when we get our biases confirmed, we don't think that we got anything to learn. Remember, genetically, the one who decides what reality is the one who is on top of the hierarchy of power. So that means the king, the high priest or priestess or whatever it is, those always were the ones who got to decide what reality is. And we see that with the dictators today too. It's the same thing. They dictate what reality is, and people say, yay, you know, rewriting history, and you know, it's just how it is. So when you already know what is true and you get it confirmed, well then, right, you should be ruling the world. And then you will not take shit from anyone because you know better than anybody else. It means that you have higher value than anyone else, right? You should be empowered, and you feel empowered by having your biases confirmed. So it means today, humility is out the window. Humility comes also from being corrected so many times that you give up the belief that you're ever right. And then you realize it's not really about that, is it? It's about existing in the world with other people and other beings, right? But that's out the window for now, also through consumerism, through that whole self-centeredness. And also understand, like, when we have a society, as is where we all feel lost, we don't feel that community, and we create false community. What is fundamental for the development of the human brain, personality, is the experience of being seen. Like truly seen. Back to the tribe. When you live your whole life with the same people, they get to know you quite well. And they will love you and support you, and they will show it because their life also depends on you. And that's the beauty of the tribe, right? So you are an integral part, and you know that you are productive, you are important, you are valued, because you will do something, you will provide something, you will find your, specialty, right? A hunter, whatever it is, that will benefit the group, and people will love you and support you for it, and then they will, share what they're doing. You feel seen. They know you through everything you do. Your good stuff, bad stuff, they are there and they know you. We don't have that today. So when we understand that the fundamental kind of core of the development, like knowing kind of who we are through the eyes of others, and that appreciation, love, knowing that that's there forever, what happens then? We become self-centered. It's the same process when we kind of don't know who we are. Because think of if you have like 30 people around you and they all interact with you and experience you, and they will tell you how they experience you, and you will grow, and it's that collaboration. And now it doesn't happen. So you don't feel seen. So you want attention, right? A child who is not being seen for who they are will get self-centered. Narcissism is basically a cry for help. It's like, I need that confirmation. I don't know who I am. I need that community. So they're trying to force the world into seeing them. But because it's not happening naturally, they then think, oh, right, it's about what I think I am, and then I will project that and force people to give me that confirmation, which is social media, right? It's painful, and it's also painful to watch because it comes from pain. It's come from a deep sense of not being seen, not being recognized, right? And that if you've been fortunate enough in life to have people around you who recognize you, not for who you want to be, but recognize you for who you are, past, your body and your personality, straight to the core. It's not just about someone seeing you, but also seeing through you, right? That experience where you don't have to hide anything. No matter what it is, you're still loved, right? Narcissists have never experienced that. That craving for attention is that lack of togetherness and community. This is why people are more self-centered now than ever. It comes from pain, right? Because we think that, oh, if I am then to get that, I need to be someone. I need to be louder. I need to call on people to come to me and see me. Just like when you're injured, right, and nobody's coming, you will be screaming. And what we're seeing today is people screaming through their expressions and personalities and all of that. But it's simply pain. And people are applauding it. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But it's back to just one more thing, because now, many of these systems that we have today, because that was part of the question, it's based on when you have a generation that grew up under very different circumstances. They already understand that, oh, I have to contribute, I have to add value, I have to be someone in myself, we support each other, and they share common beliefs and the understanding of what society is, because that is what it takes to build a society that everyone's on the same page. And especially after the Second World War in the Western world, and several decades after, it was a big we, right? And then one could develop all these systems, even like Social Security, all of that, and people will not abuse it because it was part of a contract within the huge tribe, right? We do what we can, and we trust each other, and we support each other, and all of that. So when you have a generation with a very different life experience, they can then develop all of these systems, and it will work for them because they did not grow up with it. It's an addition, right, that requires a framework in their psychology. And when you now have kids or young people who grew up with this, and all they know is emptiness and narcissism, right, and cravings and all of that, they don't have the same platform, which means that they will see these systems and use them in a very, very different way. They will have different pains. They will have different life experiences and very different beliefs. And this is why one can see the older generation, they can work with all of this kind of just fine. And then you see people who grew up in this, lacking that framework, and it's damaging them. Okay.
Yes, so we've got a question from YouTube. How can the younger people, well, first of all, you've talked a lot about the new paradigm and slightly more advanced souls incarnating in. So that's what this question relates to. How can younger people both be more advanced new paradigm souls and also then more narcissistic and less developed? Will they somehow be activated to their more true, real maturity when the collective shifts later on?
Most individuals, they operate in a passive consciousness, meaning that they only react. And it means when there are changes, they will adapt to it through their reactions because they want to survive. So for the majority of the population, they will just go wherever society goes. Yes. When it comes to how we can then kind of work with this as individuals, we should not fall into the trap of thinking, oh, because we have a more open consciousness, this does not apply to us. And, it does, even more. If we want to be the adults in the room, we have to prove it, right? And this is, if we start with the most fundamental thing, if we're not to be triggered, to live in reaction, to not criticize, to not be violent, to not be aggressive, to not protest, we need to start from a different place. And one principle that we need to understand is that whenever something happens, it's because it's absolutely necessary. Understand that this world is a rendering, right? It's basically consciousness and karma being printed so that you and others may experience their own karma, their own resistance, their own potential, interact with it, and then learn and grow. So, when something exists as karma or as information in consciousness, it will have to manifest. That's the purpose of manifestation. This is how manifestation works. So, when something occurs, it's because there is a certain karma, there's a certain information, a certain energy, and that dictates matter. And this is why when we look at a manifestation, we can't say that shouldn't have happened. It's impossible, it's math. It's a rendering, right? You can't look at a printout and see, well, that's the wrong design. There's something wrong with the printer. It's the design. You have to go back, right, to the design and do something better. So it always starts with consciousness and with karma, right? So this is also why there's no point in reacting to anything, because if something is, it's because there is no alternative. There is never an alternative to what is. There is never an alternative to reality. As I always say, you can never win a discussion with reality. It's pointless. So it means that the world is always perfect because it's simply a printout of consciousness and karma. So if we have that as a starting point, we never have to worry. We never have to be afraid. We never have to protest anything, because we know when something manifests, it's because it exists as consciousness, karma, and energy, right? So, how do we then work with it? If we then want to change something, we cannot change the rendering, because the rendering is a consequence. We have to change consciousness, right? Then we have to change minds and hearts and consciousness of people. And that's where you need to go. And how do we do that? It's back to the old saying, you have to be the change you want to see in the world. You have to be a living example of higher consciousness. And be so in a credible way. The challenge I talk about this a lot when it comes to modern spirituality, is that narcissists have flocked towards spirituality as yet another way to feel special and to project that we are more important because we have higher consciousness. And it's just posing. It's just fantasy, because it's about making other people believe that we have a higher consciousness, not actually being in it, because nobody cares. Nobody cares about you actually being in higher consciousness, right? But if you can make other people admire you for it, right? So for many people who have this pain of not being seen, they see this as one way, and especially if they're not able to be seen through achievements in the world, right? You can be an athlete or good in business or whatever, right? But some people feel that this is their thing, and that's okay. But spiritual work goes deeper. It's only about what you practice for real. This is why you have to set the example and be a living example in a credible way. It's about being cohesive. So, if you have a belief system, I don't care what it is. I want you to show me how you practice it, how you live it. Because otherwise it's worthless. If you have a certain value, that represents, your journey. But what makes it credible is if you actually live it yourself. And this is where we all need to look at ourselves on a daily basis. The values we have, what we stand for, what we tell the world about ourselves, are we living up to them? Because very often, this is a principle I often tell people, you only project the expectations onto other people that you're not living up to yourself, right? You see often people with enormous expectation to other people, they're not living up to them, right? You see this also in religion, for instance, where the people who are most aggressive about other people following their rules, they're not following them themselves, right? They're faking it. And they have inner conflicts and outer conflicts, but they want to force other people to live by the rules because they have to be forced to live by the rules and they don't want to. So they want to punish everyone who is not following because they are suffering trying to follow the rules. And they're furious about people getting away, living happy lives without, being constrained by the rules of that religion, so they have to be punished. So it's the same thing with all sorts of expectations. When you expect something from someone, most likely you are not living up to that expectation, which is why you are projecting, which is why you have to communicate. The values you live up to, it's simply part of who you are, right? And it translates into and through everything you do. And when you've met people who are kind of living up to their own standards, people have a tendency to pull themselves together around them. Not because they're saying anything, but because they represent something. Right? And that is the kind of credible type of influence. When they set the example, right? And it's also, in leadership. When you look at leadership in different parts of the world throughout history, one thing that has always been looked upon as true leadership is this: never ask anyone to do something you haven't done yourself. Right? Because when you have done it, and you know what it is, and people know it, you have the right to ask people to also, do whatever that is. So it's back to, we have to do it ourselves. We have to live it ourselves. So be a living example. Like, if you want change, well, practice it. Be it. Always hold can be your end of the bargain. Mm-hmm.
Yes, a classic sort of challenge that one faces in this kind of moment is, I'm going to relate it to family, because often there will be big divides within a family in terms of politics or religion or other things. And often it arises that it feels like it's honoring one's values or understanding of principles, to say like, oh, I need to cut off communication with my family because we're so far apart, or that kind of thing. I'm kind of curious, like how would you help us to think differently about our relationships with the people that we arguably love the most and have the most history with, right, but who those relationships can also be some of the most filled with conflict.
Right. Now, it's back to living up to your own expectations. The annoying thing about family is that they call bullshit, right? Often when we have conflict with our families, because we proclaim this and that, or this is how it's supposed to be, and we're not that person. And they see it, which is very annoying. So that is often that we try to convince them that I'm like this and this is right, and they're just like, we know you. No, you don't. So it's that. The thing is, again, when something is internalized, when you are doing your part, just like in religion, people who are actually practicing their religion, they become very open-minded. Because when you go to the essence of any religion, religious practice, or spiritual path, when you practice, you become humble. And you recognize that, oh, this is my path. This is what I do. And there are plenty of other ways to do it, and it's none of my business. I got more than enough with trying to live up to my own values and my own practices. Because when we practice spiritually, love grows, empathy grows, which means that we see that there's room for everyone. We don't have the need to force anyone into doing anything. And this is also like the idea to stand up for ourselves. If we're already standing, we don't have to do that. We're standing up when we're faking it, when it's not internalized, when we have not reached that level yet. But when we are proclaiming and when we're trying to project someone we're not, that needs protection, because basically, like, when this is who you are, it's just who you are, right? No matter what people think, no matter what they do, that's just who you are, right? It's just like when it comes to your height, for instance, right? How tall you are. It's not like when you meet people that you have to like defend yourself and tell them how tall you are. Nobody cares. It's just who you are, right? Anything that is completely internalized is obvious. So often in families, it's, we can fake with other people, but there's something about the mirror with family that unless it's internalized, they will attack it because it's not quite there, right? And that's so annoying because we want to decide who we are, but when it's not there, it's not who we are. We're trying, but we can also be honest about that. But then that's often when we want to convince other people, right? When we want to control the narrative, because again, when it's in place, it's just who you are. It doesn't matter what people think. You don't try to convince anyone. You don't even have to talk about it. So standing up for yourself means that, yeah, you're faking it, right? The more you do spiritual work, the more you let other people be. And whatever is true in you, you realize that nobody cares. It's nobody's business. Why would I need to communicate this? Why would I need confirmation? We only need confirmation when we don't see clearly, right? This is why in kind of normal consciousness as a person, we need to be confirmed to understand who we are. But in spiritual work, when we kind of like work on things and it's there, we don't need that confirmation because now we have awareness. That is the difference between being in a lower consciousness and having spiritual awareness. The spiritual awareness is only there where you don't need any confirmation because it's true. If it's true, it's how you operate. And you recognize that, well, other people, different consciousness, different journeys, so you don't need that confirmation. When you need a confirmation, for instance, that you're very spiritual, it means that you're not. It's still a projection, it's still a story. Right? This is why we have to do the work if you want to be an example of the solution. It's not enough to pose. It's not enough to proclaim that you have certain values and that you feel very important because of it. It's how you live your life every day. And how you then, through that, become aware. As of the moment something in you reaches consciousness, that it becomes awareness, you will never, in that particular thing, whatever it is, seek any confirmation, any understanding. You will not project, you will not try to convince, because now it's simply who you are. And this is also how we can, test ourselves and be honest, right? And look at ourselves. When it comes to what principles, we're studying and where we are in our own journey, in what areas have you reached that level, right? When you seek being understood or confirmed, it means like it's not quite there yet, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but we can learn to be honest. I always say that it's not about how far we've come. It's about our level of honesty around our journey and where we are. Right? But because we live in a society where we now feel that we have to fight and defend ourselves, we begin by defending and explaining, and it means we get lost in that. Your spiritual journey belongs to you. And only you. And what you figure out is only relevant to you. The deeper you go, the more unique your path gets, and what you figure out and what you realize sometimes cannot even be explained, because it's the unfoldment of what you are, your very essence, and there are no words for that. And you begin to tap into that reality, and you look at the world from that perspective, and all you want to do is love it. You don't want to change it. You want to change yourself. When you are in a lower consciousness, because you are reactive, you feel you have to change the world so that the world can be, in harmony with you. Because you react, so you become the world. So the world has to change for you to feel comfortable, right? The spiritual journey is about understanding that, you're the one who can change. And it's also easier, right? Is it easier to change yourself or the world? In a lower consciousness, you seriously believe that it's easier to change the world. So, spiritual awakening is realizing that, I can adjust, I can change, I can heal. And then you do, right? And you never go back. So when you're too attached to the ways of the world, it means that we're still operating in a consciousness of pain and suffering and survival.
So from the perspective of the person or the ego, I find you presenting an interesting conundrum or sort of dilemma of the more expanded my consciousness gets, the more I will want or just will leave others to do what they're doing. So how do I reconcile that when what those people are doing, for example, is dismantling democracy in America or, causing conflict in the Middle East? Do I just let them be? Where's that line of letting others be and taking action?
Right. Now, When something happens, it's because it must happen. So, as I said, there is no point in trying to change a consequence. You must change the cause. And the cause is consciousness and karma. Which means the only way to change it is by lifting consciousness and by inspiring others to lift their consciousness and to heal. So yes, when things are happening politically, it's because that is the consciousness and karma. These are the experiences that the collective have decided is absolutely necessary in order to grow. Right? And I often compare that to, as an adult, when you look at children, right? And they do weird stuff, right? But then you remember, oh, I did that too. And it's part of growing up. They have to do weird things. So you can't just tell them no to everything. Don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. You have to let them, right? They have to fall. They have to all, get scratches. They have to try things, right? And sometimes that's painful, but it's necessary for a child's development to regulate themselves, to experience different forms of pain, to experience failure as well as victories, to experience the full spectrum of what is, so they can learn to regulate themselves. Collectively speaking, it's the same thing. Remember that the human life form still is quite primitive when it comes to awareness. Real awareness is just starting to bud, right? Because humans still believe that they exist outside of nature. Just that thought is insane. But looking at how humans are treating this planet, treating other life forms, treating each other, it means like there's nobody home yet. So it's also important from a karmic point of view for humans to experience what they're doing to the planet, what they're doing to themselves, like in such a way that they begin to understand. Right? And they need to then experience the consequences. So, for instance, when it comes to how humans are destroying this planet, is business as usual, and people only care when something happens to them. But even then, right, it takes a long time, because you would think at this point that collectively humans had understood that, oh, we can't destroy the planet, right? But, cheap stuff, that's more important. We eat food that kills us. We eat poison. But it tastes good. We're not smarter than this as humans, which means humans will have to go to enormous amounts of pain to begin to connect our behavior with outer consequences and start not just the process of healing, but begin to choose healing. The smartest healing is to avoid injury to start with, right? But you need a lot of injury to get to that point, right? And this is the human journey right now, maximum injury, and it's all self-inflicted until humans are so sick, so injured, so crushed, and they understand, oh, we did this to ourselves. Maybe we should change how we behave, because it's not even difficult. So it's that. So what's happening in the world is just this. Over time, it will build awareness and consciousness, but it takes experience to get there. Just like for many of you, your spiritual journey, at least consciously, started after you having experiences of pain, of suffering, making you question everything, right? That's what it took. For as long as everything works, We don't ask questions. It's only when we get injured, when we experience the pain, so we see that this is not worth it, then we'll begin asking questions. So for most people, at least in our part of the world, what triggers spiritual awakening is enough pain, enough suffering, enough problems. So we feel that life is not working. This can't be it. And we have to go through this collectively too. And the rest of this century, you will be that. And just like you can look at a small child, knowing that you can buy the child a bike, and you know there will be crying and screaming and blood and torn clothes and all of that, right? But you still buy the bike because that's just what you need to go through. But once you learn how to ride, then the freedom comes. In a spiritual consciousness, this is how we look at the world. This is how we look at what people are going through. Because we bought them a bike, right? We know where we're going with this. But the child may not know if, he doesn't really understand the joy of riding a bike, no wind through your hair, and like that freedom as a child. But the first attempts ends with blood and screaming, and that's all the child can experience. And then, but it just takes a while, right? But as a parent, as an adult, you know that this is what it takes, and good things are coming. So it's the same thing. You cannot take away the joy of biking simply because there is a little bit of blood. But in a low consciousness, even as a spiritual student, that's what you want to do. Oh, look at that. We should protect the child from the bike. No, you should not. Building competence, building skill, building awareness, even if it's bodily awareness. This happens. There is pain and injury in this or that until you find your balance, right? And humans have to find their balance because this planet is a fucking big bicycle, and humans have to learn how to ride it, basically. So that's the process. So it's also in a spiritual consciousness to keep kind of steady, keep focus on where we are going, understanding the purpose of everything happening on the planet, right? And is working out the karma, finding the balance on this bike. And then there will be freedom, but not until, right? And it cannot be stopped because life always wants to grow. Life always wants to expand. That is what evolution is. So it's, as a kind of spiritual, individual, try to lift yourself into this position and love the process.
Yes, we have a question in the audience here.
Yes, I found this topic tonight very interesting about kindness and compassion today and everything that you have brought up. And I've lately really been exploring this state of kindness and compassion and trying not to dictate as much from my own point of view in my life. But then I also see at the same time that sometimes I can fall into the trap of being passive and submissive and then disguising that as kindness. So could you give us some examples of how we can do this and still have that firm hand,
Absolutely.
that guidance that is like taking care of you, but hey, come on, wake up,
Yes. Now, it's when it comes to kindness, you're absolutely right that because humans are not used to it anymore, we're in this kind of black and white world right now where either we control or someone else will, right? If I'm right, then you're wrong. We don't understand that there are many different points of view at the same time, many different colors at the same time. So this can be difficult, but kindness is, and compassion are about being unconditional. The moment you behave unconditionally, meaning that you're not acting from a reaction, you're not acting from your own survival, then the only intention is love, because what else would there be? People can experience this, through their hobbies often, when they have passion, when they do something that does not have any productive purpose, right? Why do it? Well, there's obviously something else. It triggers joy, it triggers all of that, and it's that state. That's kind of where you can begin. But it's learning to treat others not because of how they behave, but simply because they exist. And seeing past and understanding that whatever someone is doing, they are doing their best. It may be difficult to understand, but it's like we always need to relate to the fact that we all have different paths, right? Spiritually, also physically. And remember that even in this form as a human, you are shaped through your upbringing, through your life experiences. And it means that your brain will draw conclusions on how the world works based on very, very few experiences. How many personal experiences have you had when it comes to anything significant, right? And the brain will use those very few experiences to define how the world works. And then you make your life-changing decisions based on that, and you believe that you understand how everything works. And because this is how we all operate, we end up with very different conclusions. Because statistically, we're all, insignificant. So anything you think you understand is wrong. It's not full. It's never the full truth. And this is also what we learn spiritually, that there's always more, right? That we never have the full truth, and we don't have to. We understand that there are different positions, different journeys. So when someone arrives at a conclusion, and they have a definition or a belief system, even politically, it does not come from them being stupid. It's simply that they have a different life experience. They have a different journey. The combination of genetics, karma, experience, thoughts, belief system, this or that, the brain will just try to build a map based on that. So all our maps are different. And it means we behave not only from that map, but we believe that the world is that map. So compassion and kindness is, in a way, understanding this. So not observing or judging people based on their maps and how they behave, because, that's just where they are, right? That's their journey, and they are doing their very best. Because we, as humans, we only do what works. Back to the rule of survival, meaning that we're all trying to survive. So whatever we do, whatever we say, we think it will work for us. It's about individual survival, right? And it means that we're doing our best. Our subconscious brain is calculating everything all the time, trying to find good solutions and good actions because we want to live, which means we always do our best. And then we look at that with a different map and say, based on my map, that is completely out of line and completely whack, but not based on their map. So kindness is going beyond individual position And relating to kind of the bigger perspective of existence, like we are all here for the same reason. We're all trying to find truth. We're all trying to figure out who we are, what reality is, and what the connection is between the two. We're all journeying. We're all in evolution. And that's what's going on. So kindness is basically taking a step back and up from all of that and understanding that there is something else going on. And the only way to assist someone past their level of consciousness is by nurturing them, is by loving them and supporting them so they will grow. Right? Fear blocks growth. Punishment blocks growth. If you want to lift someone's consciousness, you will have to nurture them where they are. Often when I meet people, whatever they believe, I support it. Because the only way they can figure out more than they know is by being confident in navigating their map. Right? So I will try to support what they believe, support their understanding of the world so they can build that confidence. Because when they journey more, they will correct their map. We're all explorers, whether we know it or not. Right? We're all self-learning, we're self-healing. So it's having the attitude of wanting everyone to figure things out. You know, when you understand something, it's because you have been journeying in that direction for a long time. You've been interacting with manifestation of that principle or whatever it is so many times. And you've fallen flat on your face so many times. You've been kicking and screaming and resisting and, you know, all of that. And then gradually you get it. And you cannot look at other people who've not had the same level of experience. They're like, hey, they don't understand. You need to let them figure out on their own. But then giving them the confidence, nurturing them, loving them, seeing them, being compassionate in such a way that they feel it's okay. I'm not the enemy, right? There is room for you in the world. So that instead of just fighting, they can dare to walk their own path and test out their own maps. And this is why kindness is so important. It completely shatters the whole game of conflict and power. And many people today are so surprised when they encounter true kindness because humans today don't believe it even exists. If you show true kindness, most people will believe that something else is going on here. What does she want? Like, you know, what she's after. They will believe that you are manipulating because you're after something else. As a civilization, we have lost kindness, which is so important that, you know, we reintroduce it. And that is, you know, one of the most shocking things you can do is to be kind. Think about it. When did you see true kindness in the real world last? Right? People are fighting, they're afraid, like they're lost in this, you know, game going on right now. Simply being kind. And kindness also means that you are not expecting confirmation, you're not expecting anything back. You're behaving with kindness because that is who you are. It's an expression of divine love. It's an expression of being unconditional. So you behave with kindness in a natural way. But it's one of the most rebellious things we can do today because people get so confused. Just think of like if you meet someone or encounter someone who's then very negative, criticizing everything, you know, like, and kind of like just, they want to pick a fight. most people are kind of like in that state. And when you just show them kindness for no reason at all, it will completely throw them off their game. But remember that everyone draw their maps based on experience, right? This is why it's so important that you are an example. Because when you decide to be kind and compassionate for real, it's an active state. It's something you show, it's something you demonstrate. But it means the person experiencing you, although they may not understand what this strange behavior is, it will affect them. It's an experience they are having with a foreign concept of kindness and compassion. And it will be kind of like, slowly entering their mind. And over time, it may change their map. Right? We are all examples. I talk about this a lot. We're all examples. Every moment, the question is, what are you an example of? What you think about yourself, your value system that you can, how spiritual you are. What example are you to others? How are other people relating to you as an example? What are you an example of? And that is something you can practice and train and decide, I want to represent this in the world. Well, demonstrate it in such a way that other people experience it. It's not enough to sit at home, right, and feeling very spiritual and open and loving, right? And then you go out into the world, either like pretending other people don't exist, or you are triggered, you react, you criticize, you behave like an asshole. And that's your consciousness. How other people experience you is extremely important, because that is how you can lift consciousness, how you can lift the planet. So deciding that you want to be a living example, and then also reflect, okay, how do I demonstrate, right, my consciousness? How do I demonstrate what I stand for spiritually? How can I be a force for good in the world? How can I behave in such a way that other people who experience it can redraw their maps and maybe understand that the world is not what they think it is, that love exists, right? That compassion exists, that kindness exists, that generosity exists, that it's possible for someone to be seen, right? And this is an important part of our behavior. As I talked about, being seen as the most fundamental experience a human can have. Try to see people. And you can't judge them and see them. Because when you judge, you're using your own map, your own karma as a default, and then you judge people based on how that behavior would look on your own map and in your own value system. And then your consciousness is simply too low. Seeing them means that you see their essence. You see what they're attempting, what they're trying to do spiritually. You see who they are as essence, not their human behavior, because most people are just trying to get by. Most people have the experience that I'm something else than this. And this is also where the narcissism and projection is coming from, that they're caught in this reaction game and they can't escape it. And then it means that they're sending out a version of themselves that they know is not who they are, right? Most people get desperate and they just want to be seen. The more they're trying to be seen, the worse it gets, because they react all the time. Remember that humans today are in a state of emergency. because there are too many reactions, too many triggers, too many like conflicts, all of that. And it means that most people are at their worst behavior at most times, even when they're by themselves. It's also why, you know, when people move to the countryside, right, the simple life, you know, there's like 3 cows and, you know, a few neighbors. People get happy because fewer things to react to, less negativity, less criticism, and they're able to breathe and think and behave naturally instead of all behaviors being a reaction to something, right? But for the most part, people live in this civilization. But for you to practice seeing and recognizing, seeing past behaviors, seeing past their pain and suffering and ego stuff and survival games, and see there is a spiritual being in there, right? There is a soul trying to wake up, right? And seeing that and loving that unconditionally, no matter what they do, can have a deep transformational effect. So peel everything away and try to see and connect. You can also do that from afar when you just observe someone doing something. Try to see through to what's really going on. Understand that there is someone in there needing desperately to be seen, recognized, and understood. So this as a kind of practice of service is important. It means also when you talk to someone, listen to them. Don't explain yourself. Listen. Try to see them. Try to be compassionate. Try to kind of cut through their attempts at impressing you or like whatever they're doing, you know, whatever their weird stuff and negativity and criticism, just try to see them, right? And then the words will come, because when we are in a state of love, when our attention is to really try to reach someone with love, we are successful at it, because you're not trying to reach the person, you're trying to reach the individual inside of it, feeling trapped. Often, again, the experience of being seen for real can trigger that connection, right? Because humans do not believe in who they are until someone tells them. That takes, you know, spiritual work, right? For most people, they're not there. And this is one of the greatest gifts you can give to anyone. But it takes for you to be present, right? To be past your own bullshit. And you cannot be in the reaction and trigger and all of that we've talked about and do this at the same time. You have to dedicate yourself to setting the example of being someone who uplifts through your presence, right?
Yes, so we've gotten in a perspective and question on YouTube. So it feels like we are living in the era of billionaires, a natural consequence of unchecked consumerism and capitalism. But right now they seem to be getting away with everything, while the rest of us bear the cost of the game they are playing. They face no real consequences, yet their decisions harm the planet, the environment, animals, and people. My question is, how do we navigate around this sort of situation? How do we resist a system so heavily tilted in this very small group of people's favor?
By loving it, by understanding this is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, something else would have happened. So the question is, how can you be part of making this movement and journey go faster? It's basically just like if you have a textbook in school, okay, and you need to go through it, you need to learn the subject, and you need to kind of finish the textbook and pass your exams, all you can do is then encourage, assist, so that the student will learn faster. Because there is absolutely no way around it. So understanding that this whole thing, sure, this is old karma again. Throughout human evolution, dictatorships, that's the norm, right? Democracy is a blip. It's an experiment. The difference between the people on top and everybody else, that's been the default, and we're kind of gravitating back to that. Now, the psychology, and there are many different patterns in this, but one thing that's really interesting, because you can just look at yourself. When we are afraid, when we're insecure, when we are confused, what do? We will go back to our behaviors that are defined by our patterns and genes. So, for instance, when you are afraid, you will not think rationally. Instincts take over, right? Because it means in that situation, the chance of your genes having developed through millions of years, having survived because you are the product of survival, that there is competence there that you as a person cannot just invent. So the brain changes and kind of goes back to genetic programs. This is also why when you're triggered, you behave based on programs. Autopilots take over, right? So we go back to what works, back to what has worked and what we know. So when we're confused, people go back to that. And this is also why now, collectively, because as a society, fear, confusion, like all of it, we go back to a model of society that we are genetically comfortable with. And that is the king and the subjects. The people on top deciding what reality is because it feels safe. So although one can look at it and say, why are people choosing this? It's their patterns. It's genetic, it's biological, because it feels safe. So humans will always naturally go back to dictatorships, go back to these models. We can see this is extremely kind of unfair, right? Oppression, the rich stealing everything. Sure, that's been human evolution. So when we're not sure of how to behave or how to navigate as people, we have genes and patterns that can take over, and this is it. People know how to behave in that type of model. This is also why, for instance, what we're seeing in the States, it's happening very quickly, because you can look at it as, how can this be happening so quickly? It's because everybody knows how to behave. People do not yet know how to behave in a democracy, because that's an experiment. This has followed humans for several 100,000 years. That's why. So in times of great uncertainty, one wants the strong leader. One gravitates back to that kind of dictatorship model, strict hierarchy. So that's why. But again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a fact. The only thing that can heal it is for humans to lift their consciousness. And then we need enough people who can operate from a higher consciousness to bring that in. And that's where you come in, hopefully, right? It's a practice. And it's important to bring, at least when it comes to like spiritual communities, awareness that there's a job to do beyond being spiritual and feeling better about ourselves. It's like, how do we actually lift? So it's through our example, right?
So I've been reflecting on There's a story in Buddhism, I'm going to probably relate to it quite inaccurately, but something about compassionate heart. It was this ship captain who had then a pirate come on board who was threatening to kill everybody. And the perspective was, in that moment, that actually the kind thing to do was to kill the pirate, to not only to stop him from hurting other people, but also to relieve the pirate of his own pain, which was the source of his violent behavior. And it just makes me wonder about this time, because if we look back at World War II, for example, this path of abundant democracy and all of this freedom that we've been exploring, the experiment you're talking about, was forged in a lot of violence and, really quite horrible behavior, actually. So I'm just trying to, how can we think about this spiritual rebellion and the actions that we need to take in order to also express express kindness, love, compassion, generosity? Will it always look peaceful and gentle and sweet? Or, I've been sort of stuck in that place, if you could help out.
It's more a matter of where you are in your own intention and what you're channeling. And then other people will react to that. They will respond, and often because they get also a higher flow in, their minds will be a little bit confused and sometimes inspired. Sometimes there will be an accelerated process. And we know this often when we're exposed to truth or love. Our patterns may start shaking, and we may go through our inner conflicts. So that may happen. But it's learning spiritually to be more concerned about how you behave than how others behave. Because that's none of your business. So when you understand that you're not to try to change the world at all, you're trying to change yourself and your ability to heal, your ability to lift. But then it's up to other people if they want to make use of that. Because if they want to lift themselves, that's for them to decide. They can be as destructive as they want to. They can do anything, because that's the wonderful thing about incarnation and manifested existence. Whatever experience you need to grow, there's a room for that. And if you need to be violent, if that's where you are and you need to experience that, well, there are also other individuals who have signed up to experience being in the receiving end, because that's what they need to experience. Nothing can manifest unless it's absolutely necessary, unless it's an correct mathematical rendering of what is. So it's kind of learning that, yes, in a way, kindness from your side will always be loving and kind of peaceful, because you are then in harmony with life. But that may then be received in disharmony, right? And when something is out of harmony and you bring in something that is finely tuned, the disharmony is more audible, right? It can be experienced even more clearly. We can make people more aggressive because their own patterns and where they're actually at in their consciousness will become clearer to them. And that is part of it. And you cannot really focus on that. It's just like, are you being true? Right? Are you acting and behaving from the heart? Are you acting from higher consciousness? Are you able to go beyond the self and your ego and try to be a vehicle for life? So, yes, it is the state of being in harmony and then letting kind of nature, life, or God, whatever you want to call it, work through you.
Yes, so from YouTube, a question, can psychedelics be a force of universalization in this time?
Well, what psychedelics do is simply change the modality in the brain. And in different cultures, they have been important tools because it made people go kind of past and beyond their own kind of survival. Because our brains, of course, are focused on whatever will help you survive, right? And it means that the brain will filter out anything else. It seems like when you walk down the street, right, 99.9% of all information will be filtered out, or you can't even remember it, even though it happened like 1 minute ago. Only what seems to be relevant to you, the brain will notice. So you're already in, you have your map, and you have kind of your goals, you have your survival, and the brain will then kind of look at your map, look at the world, like, okay, where are the things that are on my map? And it will try to find the manifestation that resemble the manifestations, the objects on the map, right? The rest will be gone because it's not on the map. So when you use psychedelics, the map is gone for a while. And it means that the brain does not understand how to filter and what should be given, emphasized or not. So it means that you get more information in. But that's just the starting point. All right? Then, what is it for? Right? For many people, there is so much tension and force around their kind of mind map and what they think they should do and all of that because, again, survival today is a state where everyone is reacting to everything all the time. So most people are completely locked into that. So psychedelics can help the brain relax and then open up. So that can be valuable in and of itself. But it can also be a tool where that change modality can then allow for you to work differently and then go in and look at things, right? Without having the normal filters, the normal patterns dictate both what you should look at, in what way, and what conclusions to draw, right? So it can open up the creativity in the mind. But it then takes also spiritual practices and work for it to really have an effect. But psychedelics are kind of slowly coming back. And this time, it seems like our culture is ready for it because they can be very valuable. But of course, people use them recreationally, which means that it's, then it's just trying to escape. I understand that people are taking drugs all over, right? The drug use is like everywhere. It's just insane. But people have the need to self-medicate because they're trapped in their own pain, their own suffering, their own patterns, their own behaviors, like all of that. And it's too much. I completely understand that people feel they need a break. But what they need is spiritual practices. They need to heal. Taking drugs, it does not heal anything, it makes it worse. So when you take psychedelics with no true healing intention or no kind of like work intention or spiritual practices, it may actually make things worse. Because I've compared this to, for instance, when you go on a detox, like, because again, we are all poisoned today, right? Just breathing will, we get so many strange chemicals into our system, and the body doesn't know what to do with it. So what it does is store it in tissue. Because what else to do? It doesn't know how to process. So we all have, tens of thousands of different chemicals in our system. We have microplastic in our brain. It's everywhere. So when we go in a detox, what can happen then is that you get an increased organ activity, meaning that some of these toxins, instead of being, slumbering in your tissue, will then start to circulate, and you then may end up being poisoned. It may end up being in a worse condition because now it's, up there, but the organs still didn't know what to do with it, right? And this happens with a lot of people now when they go on detox and they don't know what to do, when they don't know what they're doing. It's that. So when you go on a detox and you know what you're doing, and you kind of follow a program and a practice, and you help your body both detox and increase organ activity and restore and build out, like all of these things, yes, then it works. But many people today, when they go on a detox, they end up with worse health than before the detox. And this is the same thing with psychedelics, because there's so much to kind of work on that if it's just like, getting a break from our own bullshit, it can still make stuff kind of circulate in your mind. And your mind may still not know how to process. So you still may just combine them in new ways, just like when you go on a detox and end up with an even worse cocktail or with new chemicals being created. So one should have respect for all tools. And I say, like, working with psychedelics will have the best effect if you have a rigorous spiritual practice, right? And that you have a lot of experience. So you know yourself, you know how to work, you know how to work in yourself, your patterns, and you kind of understand your inner landscapes, yes. But if it's recreational, I would say, like, I understand it because people are in pain. But if we talk about it from a spiritual perspective, it is to be an add-on to many years of spiritual practice, not seen as a shortcut or as instead of.
All right, we have a question in on YouTube from California. Throughout my life, many people have told me they feel very seen by me. It's a quality I know I have, but I also often meet resistance or even rejection because of that same quality. It often makes people feel intimidated by me, especially I find here in the United States and in the Los Angeles area. It makes deeper connections harder to build. And I know I'm not the only one who experiences this. Like, people literally tell me that they feel so seen by me, but then they get scared and avoid me after that experience. How can we work around this or with this?
Now, it's kind of funny that I say it blocks you from having like deeper relationships. The relationships then are not deep. So what you're missing out on is like superficial relationships, because deeper relationships are all about seeing each other for real, right? So, but understand that when you have that, the ability to see as part of who you are, it means that's part of your job. When people feel seen, it doesn't mean that always that they feel good about what they see, because it means that they see themselves through your eyes. You become a mirror. And most people don't like what they see. This is why people are doing all sorts of things to cover themselves up, to project or self-medicate, because they can't stand themselves. The point is if you want to heal, you need to understand what the illness is, right? And by seeing people, you're not just inspiring people, but you also assist people having a little peek into their own illness. And they don't want that because they don't want to be reminded. But when this is a part of you, this is one of the things you're supposed to do, no matter how people react, because they will always react no matter what. And this, I think most people in spiritual work, they experience this, that people are going to find them intimidating, because truth is not something that you want. You seek it, but people still don't want it because it's confrontational. Right? And the more you work on yourself spiritually, the more confrontational it gets, but you get used to it, right? You seek it, you want it, you deal with it, because you know that is how you can move closer to truth. So it's understandable that people would react that way to you, but that is a sign that your eyes are seeing. But also understand that it's also life seeing them. It's also them seeing themselves. So you should do more of it. And you can't let the personal stuff get in the way, because what we're talking about today is like, how do we lift the planet? How do we actually play a role in bringing the world forward, right? And when this is something that you can do, it's something you must do. So see it as a gift you're giving, and just try to be in a state of love, so that through that you release yourself from the personal level, and you can be in an unconditional state so they can see themselves even more. And then what they do with it is up to them, because sometimes that's when the healing process starts. The healing process always starts with resistance, right? So it's also, we all have different talents. We all have different things we can do to contribute. But just like yourself, many people feel it can be uncomfortable because people do react, and often negatively. But you cannot let yourself be stopped by that. This is like a dentist cannot stop drilling in tooth simply because people don't like it, right? It's still necessary. That's the healing, right? So we need to also relax and accept for people to have their reactions, because it's not towards you. It's towards what they see in the mirror. And when you can be in that unconditional state and understanding that's what's happening, and they don't want to look into that mirror again, because that's fine. But maybe that's as much as they can take. But of course, there are also plenty of people out there who are also healers in their own way that can absolutely take it. So I think it's important to, back to the tribe, right? We need people around us where we feel we're on the same page. But when people have that type of reaction, it means that, they may not necessarily be able to handle your presence. And I think many people could kind of relate to this, right? Because they're doing what you're doing in their own way. But it's just how it is. We cannot let ourselves be stopped. Because this is what it is about. Whenever we want to heal, we will be attacked, right? Whenever we show kindness, we will be accused of manipulating people. Whenever we are generous, people think that we're up to something. This is how crazy this civilization is, right? But we need to then be the example even more, so people can get used to it and also understand what our presence is about, right? Because for a person in the kind of reactive consciousness to approach truth and approach love, it has to happen with caution, because it is painful. Because it will be very confrontational. But at the same time, they will still be attracted to it because they know there is something there. So keep going and understand that this is part of healing work. People always attack you for it. But, that's the way of lower consciousness.
It's kind of ironic that situation is the flip side of what we experience with family, because they're whether they intend to or not, they see through our bullshit and they call it, and we don't want to be caught that way. And it's the same thing when we're present really seeing people, they may not be prepared for it and then react. We did get one last beautiful big question from YouTube. IKYA, are love and truth the same frequency?
The challenge with human languages is that they're based on, rather primitive life form. So the concepts are quite rudimentary, right? So they're words. What we learn in the spiritual work is that we can have words as kind of like starting points, but then we need to enter what they actually are, right? Beyond description. There are more advanced cultures with a lot of concepts around like higher spiritual principles and energies and all that, but humans don't. So in a way, I understand your question, but in another way, it doesn't matter if it's the same or if it's not, because whatever you do, whatever you are, whatever you sense in the higher state, it is what it is, and then you will figure it out. Having the right labels will not help you at all. But truth and love are definitely, in the same direction. So it's more what happens in your mind when you use certain words, right? But that belongs to you, just like the concept of God. I use the word God, but at the same time, every single person will have their own understanding of what that concept is. And everybody's right, because the concept of God is simply the highest point in your own imagination. And that will change as you grow, right? It's the highest point that their mind is able to kind of like, and that will change. Every time you expand, you will revise your concepts. And that's also for love and for truth and for everything else, right? They keep getting more precise because all your concepts expand too. So that's just part of the journey. So whatever understanding you have of anything, it will change, right? And we all know, because I think you've all been there, that you feel, now I understand, and then after 1 year, oh, I didn't understand, now I truly understand. And then next year it's the same thing, right? And often I have people coming to me, and they do this for 5 years and then they stop, right? Because they realize that, oh, right, it never ends. It never stops. There's no point in declaring that now I get it. We just say, it's another step on the ladder. It's just another step, and it never ends. And then you grow comfortable with that, because it's also wonderful to know that whatever I've learned, I'm still just scraping the surface. There's always more. And it's more seeing the transformation in us, right? And recognizing the transformation. Is this moving in that direction where I can see and experience my expansion through love, through kind of truth, through dedication, through humility, compassion, empathy, kindness, all of these things. And we see when that is growing in you and it's becoming natural behavior, not cramped, that you have to sit down and really just, when it's just like who you are, then you can see, yeah, sure, this is going in a healthy direction. So it's connecting to the complete transformation, right? The complete unfoldment. And then we know that everything will change, all definitions, all maps. So it's just, whatever it is, it's just what we understand now. And then just be open for that to continuously change and transform. And it's also wonderful whenever we just discover that, oh, I have a deeper understanding for what love is now, right? It may be any spiritual principle, and we just kind of realize that, oh, right, it's changed. I see more now, right? And this is also what I try to inspire students to do, to not be too concerned about, do you have the right understanding of the definition, but are you seeing your whole catalog of knowledge and insight and definition, do you see it changing over time? Is it becoming better? Is it becoming richer? Do you sense the transformation? Do you sense your flow in your consciousness and your love and your presence in the world? Being more healing, right? Are you more balanced? Are you more kind of in harmony? So it's that, right? But it's that, as we talk about today, also from that state, how do we translate that into the world? Like one thing that is really important for other people, and I often say this, how you love people, that's just you. What other people notice is how you treat them, right? And it's really interesting sometimes people, self-love, but it does not translate because their behavior is not quite there. So people can relate to how you treat them and how you behave, not what you experience in you. So this is why it's so important also to focus on how do we behave, how do we represent this in the world. One thing that is very important when it comes to this, part of also kindness, is being reliable and being trustworthy. Now, trustworthy is not the same as people trusting you. Trustworthy is on you, right? That is how we decide to behave in a consistent way, so people know in a way what they're getting, right? So if we represent certain values, it's when we are consistent that people feel, I can lean into this, right? That's trust. And it's not like people have to trust us, but we are behaving in a trustworthy way, right? And I think this is also what we see when you do spiritual work and it's real, you become more consistent. It's not all over the place. It's not, only when you're in a good mood. It's also when you are in a bad mood, right? That you can see that consistent behavior, that your values and what you represent and what you talk about is lived all the time, because then people can kind of rely on that, right? They will come to you, not just physically, but they may look up to you, they may look to you, they may feel seen by you. And it means when they do that, you also have an obligation to be someone people can relate to, because there is so much corruption, right? People are self-centered and they're behaving in all sorts of confused and painful ways. So when we behave in a way that is not that, but when it can be consistently loving, and when we're trying to represent the kind of spiritual values, and people start, that actually exists, as is like, they may experience that kindness exists, that generosity exists, that there is such a thing as honest people. If you say that you always speak the truth, you have to always speak the truth. Because when people rely on you and they begin to feel, okay, I can actually relate to this person, at least I know there's one person in my life, that will all shatter if you lie once. Right? So the consequence and what you do to other people increases as kind of your impact grows through your presence. And this is why it's so important to be consistent, right? To be someone people can rely on, that you are honest and that you decide to be honest, and that's a value, that you speak the truth, that you speak from the heart, that you try to behave in a consistent way, that you do not behave from self-centeredness and greed and conflict like most people, but that you try to behave and show the greater good. People are longing for this, but our civilization has lost it, right? And practicing it and wanting to be that person for others. I think it's really important today that when you are in a spiritual path, that you see that we have an obligation. We also have an opportunity, right, to show that there is a different path. Because our civilization is off the rails. People do not know where to turn. You should be one they can turn to. But you also have to understand it comes with an enormous responsibility, because the moment people trust that this actually exists, that there are people who are like this, right? They become vulnerable to that because they've already lost faith in everything. Again, this is why they're so full of pain. This is why they're, fighting in all directions at the same time. Why they're self-medicating, why they're suffering so much. So for you to show that there is a different reality and that we all can heal, we can all learn, means you have to learn to stand. You have to learn to be that person, not just in meditation, but in real life. Right? And again, this is the rebellion. It's showing that, no, this is not healthy. Because now, as finally humans have been given the bike, life is saying, okay, you have to learn how to ride it. There's a lot of screaming, there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of everything. And it will have to go on until balance has been found. And you can be a presence. You can inspire, you can lift. You can assist people in healing, seeing truth in themselves, helping them to connect to themselves, right? Because when you are caught in this reaction game, the brain stops relating to the fact that there is something on the inside, besides the emotions you get from reaction, right? Cutting through that noise and that fog and connecting to what is within. You can only do that when you meet someone who's already there, right? You have to show your connectedness. You have to vibrate, you have to demonstrate it, you have to speak it, you have to walk it, you have to guide from it. You have to show that empathy, you have to show kindness. You have to show that you are unconditional in your love, in your support, that you are not reacting. So training your way out of being triggered, training your way out of reaction is really important, right? Because the more you try to be this in the world, the more the world will throw things at you, right? Because when you have people, playing instruments and they're all out of tune, right? They will find a certain type of harmony based on their all being out of tune. When the tuning fork enters the room, one will all assume that the tuning fork is wrong, right? And that happens. And you have to be able to stand and just be in truth and be in love and let life kind of do the rest, because as there then, the conflict will be there. So first they will attack you, and then they will attack each other, and then gradually, because truth is always stronger than any lie, right? Love is always stronger than any ego, and it's for you to demonstrate it. But you cannot then let the personal get in the way, right? So moving out of fear, moving out of reaction, moving out of all this, it is difficult. But rigorous spiritual practices every day, so that you at least may move beyond your patterns and out of this insanity that is our civilization right now. And then, as I said, when you meditate in the morning, or do your practices, you may have an instrument that is tuned, so you may be clear. So at least when you go into the world, you will react less because you recognize this is not hitting me, because I'm connected. The flow comes from within. I act from love, not from reaction. Right? But it takes practice, practice, practice. And I see so many people involved with spirituality who are just as triggered and reactive as anybody else. Right? And then that's where they are. There's nothing wrong with it, but then they're completely consumed by it the same way everybody else is. And that is not contributed to the healing. Right? So it's for all of you to become more aware of this. So this is why we need to focus on being a rebel. Right? It's that, like, doing our thing and not be part of the collective. Right? And bringing something in, and also being prepared for conflict. Not first to start conflict, but the conflict within, by being exposed to truth and love. Right? Because we often think of being a rebel as being aggressive and violent and all that, but no, the most rebellious thing we can do today is being kind. It shocks people. It's quite interesting, but it's also sad. But, it's real work. Do we have any more questions? No? Okay. Now, I think also, like, one thing that's really important now, it's the opposite of greed, of course. And that is gratitude, right? Learn to say thank you for no reason at all, right? Gratitude is learning to take nothing for granted and understand that your contribution is rather small, always. Entitlement that we're experiencing today based on the self-centeredness is an illness. When we are in balance, we will always be grateful because we can see a greater context and we can see ourselves in it. Meaning that we see ourselves as both important but also insignificant at the same time. And we can experience the wonders of being alive. Right? Of having experiences, being in a body. But showing gratitude and practicing it is really important to keep the heart open. The practice of counting your blessings, it's a very simple one, but every day sit down and go through things you can be grateful for and feel it and feel that love and feel that everything we receive are gifts, right? It can keep us humble. Entitlement is such an ego power thing, and it makes us blind. So also showing gratitude towards other people. Appreciate them, right? Because gratitude is also appreciation. So showing that is the opposite of being greedy and entitled. Right? So it's often when you look at what's going on in the world and you're able to see, oh, that is not good, well, be the opposite. Right? So practicing gratitude and show it. Right? For people to observe someone who's grateful is also a little exotic today. Right? But it's looking at, like, all of these things that are like natural behavior in a spiritual state. It's foreign to people now. I think also, we briefly talked about it, but allow everyone to walk their path. It is so easy in lower consciousness to believe that our map is the right one because it feels that way to us. And in the game of survival, we're supposed to compete and we're supposed to kill the ones we're competing with, because they're supposed to die and we're supposed to win. So in that lower consciousness, when we transfer that to spirituality, we then believe that what we're doing is right, and we get the right to judge others, and we have to see through that. When we understand that we're all on different paths, we're all unique, we travel different ways, we go through different landscapes. As I say, even in our bodies, we come to different conclusions because we have different experiences. We have different karma, we're in different levels of consciousness, and that's all okay. When someone goes through something, it's because they need it. We have to let people go through what they need to go through in order to grow and to heal. We can be present to it, we can nurture it, we can encourage it, we can inspire it, but we should never judge it, because then again we are using our own maps as the default. And when we begin to see this, it's just silly, right? We stop judging, because why would we? It's a different soul on a different journey. Why would I use my own journey as a template for everything that is right and just, and then point out faults in someone else's journey when I have no idea really what's going on and where they're going and why, right? So then we're left with love and understanding. And what we can do is nurture, we can give space, right? We can show that we appreciate and that we try to see the colors and the uniqueness in other people and their journeys, and we can just love it. Not from a survival point try to see who's right and who's wrong, because it's irrelevant. If you want the freedom to walk your path, you have to give other people the freedom to walk their path in whatever way they want, in whatever way they see fit. If that means violence, if that means killing, if that means whatever they need to go through, that's their path. And through the experiences, life will teach them. This is why you don't have to, right? We can be present. And again, when we are the example of living truthfully based on our own journey, that is the example that can be transferred, right? Honesty does not imply what you're being honest about, right? A state of love does not imply what you love and in what way. So when it comes to spiritual principles, they can be kind of transferred to each individual path without you having to tell them what to do, right? So being the change you want to see in the world for real, that's what it is all about. And most people today, they do the opposite because they're lost. So they're complaining and screaming and yelling and criticizing and demanding and all of that because they're lost in their own pain. By practicing some of the things we're talking about today, you will be free. You can be happy. You can live a wonderful life, and you will be both grateful and generous and loving because it's just who you are. And then people will interact with that. They'll see there's something here. They may be triggered, they may be inspired, they may be uplifted, but that's actually none of your business. Your job is to be true. It's to work in the highest consciousness possible and available to you, and try to be consistent. Try to work kind of every day. Try again to show it in such a way that it translates and people get it somehow, right? As I said, that consistency can only come when it's real in you, because then it comes through whatever you do. And many of you have probably experienced that in some areas of yourself, hopefully, because we don't grow equally in all areas of ourselves. But there may be areas where you're more consistent than other areas. But practice. Understand that the most effective way you can contribute to the healing and the upliftment of the planet is through you doing your work, you walking your path, you expanding your awareness, you becoming better at, everything associated with spiritual presence and being. Because then you have credibility, then you have authority, and people will feel it. They will gravitate towards it, and they will let themselves be nurtured by it. And this is how we lift the world. This is how we transform the world. So also try to inspire others. I don't care what spiritual path you're on, but live it, practice it, be consistent, because that will lead you to higher consciousness no matter what. Right? We have to grow out of that kind of pretentiousness and do the work for real. And also try to find people who are also practicing for real, because then, you can also have that as a support system. Challenge each other. Make each other better so that you may be the example people look up to, that people will turn to. You will be free, right? The freer you are, the more you are able to release yourself from this civilization. It will open your channel, it will open your heart. And through that, you will have the power and ability to heal. You will have the power and ability to uplift, to guide, to speak the truth, right? And to be a spiritual presence that will not only transform the people that you meet, but you will be an active part in transforming this planet.
Thank you, IKYA, and thank you all for joining us for IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and your premier news program for practical spiritual advice in your everyday life. Mark your calendars already now. Our next episode of IKYA Live is on Monday, the 16th of June, before we take summer holidays in July. And another amazing event is coming the following week on Tuesday, the 24th of June. The free open house about the new cycle of IKYA Crystal Spiritual Education. The open house is at 6 o'clock Oslo time on Tuesday, the 24th of June, and will give you everything you need to know about how to join the, I would say, one-of-a-kind spiritual education directly with spiritual teacher IKYA, using IKYA-aligned gemstones, crystal spheres, as tools of spiritual study. It is a fabulous course that will absolutely transform your life. So put it on your calendar already now, Tuesday, the 24th of June, 18 o'clock, 6 p.m. Oslo time. And next IKYA Live is on the 16th of June. All right, thank you again so much for joining us, and we do look forward to seeing you again at our next episode of IKYA Live.